Good evening, citizens. I'm Devoid. This is my dad, Rev Atheist, and we've got a couple of friends today. Right above me is Cyberpunk, leader of a friend of ours, an organization called the Rec Writers. Cyberpunk, say hi. They know your voice.
Hey, everybody.
That's Cyberpunk. And above my dad there is MD6622. That's Mike over there, and he's one of our own guys in the Pyro Freelancer Gore. Say hi, Mike.
Hello.
So this is Redacted, a live podcast where we talk about Star Citizen and its development.
Yeah, so this week we're going to talk about some of the new things that have been coming out. We've got the monthly report. We'll go ahead and touch on that. Talk about server meshing and some of the things that are coming up that have been spotted. Some exciting things. So
Yeah, indeed. So, Mike, kind of take us away here on the roadmap. You sort of read that and kind of guided me through some of the things. I've got a bit of a reference here, but starting from the top,
still on the release view or
just the roadmap. We can talk about the Polaris is one of the first things that was on there.
Oh, so the monthly report.
Yeah, the Polaris, right? Just the exterior went through Lot 0.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping that it's maybe coming in May, in the May sale. That's my hope.
Yeah. So
that's what I'm thinking they're gonna do.
Really? You think they'd have the Polaris done that soon?
I think if they throw as many people as they could at it,
Hey,
and plus it's like,
as somebody who is eternally optimistic about releasing capital ships, yeah, that feels quick.
It does feel quick, but I think they can do it.
So, yeah, exterior is in Lot 0. That's before the lighting. That's before the damage passes. That's before a lot of things. The interior, of course.
Can I interject for a clarification for the audience, maybe?
Please do.
So, would one of you be so kind as to define what Lot 0 is?
Let's see how CIG defines it really quick.
Because I actually think it's a very interesting thing to talk about in terms of what they have to do to make these cool ships.
Of course, right. Oh, this is actually kind of a small sort of graphic here.
So much light, Saren. Holy cow.
I know. It is.
Face lighting up.
Shing.
Stanley, I think that like whatever he's looking at, like Stanley Kubrick is directing it.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Like the flash for your school pictures, right when it takes the picture, it's that bright light.
Man, see, there's motivation for me to get a camera, Rev, so I can smoke on stream with you.
Right?
Because I am smoking, but obviously you wouldn't know that. Shit, I gotta go upstairs and get my Scotch whiskey.
I'm telling you, as far as I'm concerned, this is cigars and whiskey time.
It is. So here, I've got a good sort of description here.
So talking about what LODs are for ships in Star Citizen.
Well, it stands for something. Do we know what the acronym is?
I am pretty sure it is. Is it a?
Here we go. LODs change based on polygon density to ensure consistent appearance, less artistic intervention, and promote more optimal art assets with fewer subpixel polygons.
So is this level of detail?
Yes.
So it's
it's really cool.
Yeah. So level of detail 0, which is early stage, right? But it's basically the first part of post gray box work. So it's out of gray box. It's in level of detail. They're trying to.
So basically, it's got the base skin. Probably doesn't have any kind of attachments. It's just.
No.
Initial lighting pass, that type of thing.
Like the gray skin that's around it. I'm guessing like that's.
I think you guys might be missing the significance. So like. The exterior is in such a state that what they're working on now is basically like scaling it down as you are farther away and optimizing the model for those stages. So like there's like a spectrum of VLODs, you know, like so like when you're really really far away and you're looking at something, like no matter what shape it is, it's just going to be like a speck, you know, and like when you get really really close to it, it's going to be very uniquely defined and have a lot of detail. So what they do is they are like, well, how can we make this at like a medium distance have as similar to the shape that we would, and we're very close, while using the least amount of polygons while maintaining fidelity. And so like in order to do that, they have to have exterior details to scale down. And that also applies to like the textures and stuff. And I'm sure all of us who play the game, you know, can know this. Like if you're flying up on a Starfarer or a Hercules or something like that, it doesn't so much like become or like start out low poly. It's just kind of like, you know, in real life, like when you're looking at something far away, like you can't tell if it's got like ribbed plating on it, but like it's white, you know. And so like they decide the order in which the surface details populate and how well they're rendered. So like my point is that that's actually a very not only cool for Star Citizen kind of thing, because it's not just like we have 3 images of it at 2 different, at like different sizes. It's like a whole process that is fluid, but also they have to have it in a good position, otherwise it's wasted work. And they've,
Right.
I mean, but
It's
regardless
part
of
of
what they've
the
said, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's part of the optimization process.
Yes, yeah,
So
they have to have something to do
most of
that
the
too.
work is done. They're now optimizing it.
Right.
So the exterior is getting to the end. The interior is still in gray box, but it is getting close to the end. I do think May might be a little bit optimistic. You'll
Because it's
learn
just got so much interior.
it does. It does. You'll learn that Mike here is one of our hyper optimists of the group. So
Yeah, and they're going to
he's
give
got a
us
lot
the
of
Idris in that on that May release. So
yeah.
No Idris. No Idris.
Well, I
So
mean,
move
for the viewers, like the Idris is, we've seen the interior, 90% of it, like it at least exists, you
it's
know, like
much
it,
farther along than the Polaris.
yeah,
I will say
definitely.
Sure.
this
Like,
though.
like
It
if we
will
were gonna
come
get a
before
capital ship
Squadron
in
42.
May, it would be that one and not the other.
it would be. It would be.
Yeah, and I've predicted we're going to get it,
You're
but
wrong.
uh,
But moving on.
yeah, moving on.
I just want
moving
to put a
on.
prediction out there that it will come before Squadron 42. I know they said Squadron 42, but I'll say before
We'll
Squadron
see.
42.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Moving on from that, another really cool piece of the monthly report was that they made some pretty significant AI navigation mesh improvements. For those of you who don't know, the AI navigation mesh is what allows NPCs to freely traverse things like space stations or planets as a whole. It allows them to procedurally generate pathing so they can navigate over terrain and stuff without, you know, as soon as you get a 1% incline, they don't view it as a wall, they view it as an incline and they can traverse it. Right?
Yeah, it's basically the mapping of the floor that the AI, the NPCs can walk on. Also, with the nav mesh, an important piece of it is the ability to take. So, like inside a ship, it's got a nav mesh also, and then of course the ships also have, ramps. So the nav mesh also has this piece where you can connect these two nav meshes, like when you drop a ramp or something, so that AI have the ability to traverse that transition. Super important.
Super
Which
important.
which
So
like long time in the future will become very meaningful when it's like you land somewhere and NPCs start unloading your cargo, which is something they've talked about.
Or
And
if they
is.
ever give us the ability to actually hire NPCs so they can board the ship.
Right.
so that would also mean that we would get like VIP passengers to like
Yes.
transport to like Hurston
Also,
Very
or
potentially.
also
Honestly,
passenger
that's
missions. Yeah.
that's going to be probably the tier 0 implementation of
It I think it is.
like, because the passengers is like the simplest. They don't have to interact with anything but a seat.
Yeah,
We
but
were
if they do that, they got
supposed
to
to
give us the
have that.
Genesis. They got to give us the Genesis if they do that.
Well, here's the thing. They have the E1 coming out, right? And we
Right.
were supposed to have those passenger transport missions as early as like 316.
I think the E1 is
But
the Genesis.
No,
that's
the Genesis is
the
like,
Spirit E1.
yeah, the
There's
Spirit
the
is like a
Spirit
limo.
C1, the
Genesis
A1,
Oh,
and the
E1,
E1.
the E1. Excuse me.
Yeah,
I was
no,
thinking
you're
of the
thinking
A3.
yeah, the Genesis Starliner.
Yeah.
so, quick question: is the AI nav mesh just on foot, or is that also ships? Like back
It,
then, like way back then.
so I mean, there's also ships, right? It's a different tech because ships don't have to map the ground the same way; they just have to detect elevation.
Hmm.
But the nav mesh that they were talking about is specifically for planetary mapping. They
So
had it
Oh, okay.
before where they were kind of stuck before because they could only map longitudinally,
You might have to
which
help me
was
remember
weird.
the name, but is it Zephyr Outpost on Hurston? Is an example of like a settlement where there's NPCs walking around on the ground, like just like not on a road or like because in the cities we've had NPCs for a long time, but if we were to go, someplace like Rio's Breaker Yard, like there's no NPCs there.
yeah,
But
well,
If you go to Zephyr, like there's like a whole town, and like that's an example of the early stage of the nav mesh. Is why I bring it up.
well,
It's like if anybody's ever been there.
there's also missions, right? Some of the bounty hunter missions that, or maybe it's maybe the mercenary, some of the mercenary missions, excuse me, where you're going to kill people that are at crash sites, and they're running around outside on the ground all over the place there.
So there's a difference there, right? In that they can they can cut out a section of that land and store that pathing in the memory of those NPCs. Right? The difference is that if they want an NPC to travel from city to city or planet to planet without having a way to do that procedurally, then they have to store that pathing for both
Right.
places in that NPC, and that takes up a lot of memory, right? So this
Yeah.
AI nav mesh is going to be a way for them to be in one area, see what's around them, procedurally generate pathing, and then leave and go to another place, forget that stuff, get plopped down on a new spot, take in the map around them and procedurally generate pathing there. It saves a
Yeah.
lot on memory, which saves on server performance.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of the reason.
Yeah, as with so many things with Star Citizen, the solution to their scalability problem is often having a system that instead of programming something, the system understands and charts it.
Right, exactly.
Just-
And Ritalin, yeah, there is a lot of cool data mine stuff for 323. Presumably, we're probably not going to chat a whole lot about that because data mine stuff isn't always confirmed. So there was a really juicy monthly report. We're going to talk about that, and we've got some topics for today. So we're just gonna keep to that for now. But there is some cool stuff. I agree with you, and I'm excited to see it. But moving on from AI nav mesh, something that I thought was particularly exciting that you guys may not care about is an optics rework.
I like that. I'm excited for that. That's
Optics
something I'm.
rework, yeah. So they specifically said like they want sniper scopes to feel like sniper scopes. They want to bring the optics up to modern FPS standards, which is very exciting because as a mountain sniper at Jumptown, I get very irritated by the P6 scope and scopes in general, where if you're trying to like aim at a small target a long distance away and you're trying to make fine precise movements, it like jumps what feels like a couple pixels at a time as opposed to like being a smooth motion. And so you can never like center it where you want to center it, and it really pisses me off. So I'm hoping that gets fixed in this.
Well, just for context, the improvements to the optics are not only in like the coding, because I think that's also related to their like whole rework of the guns and their like I can't remember the word for it, but like there's a little dot that shows you where the gun is actually pointed.
The reticle.
Oh,
Um, yeah, the
you're talking
reticle.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, the dynamic crosshair they
Um,
call it.
yeah, I know that's a different thing, but like it's all part of the same like guns 2.0. But the
Yeah.
the the thing about the optics is that they'll they'll have the actual telescoping, and
Yes.
so like you won't have this like the whole world zooms in times 16 around the scope. It's like the
Yeah.
scope will actually be a little window into that layer. And
Yes, and also you'll be able to look at it from different angles, and it'll actually appear like
right,
janky as if, yeah, it's realistic scopes is what
right.
they're going for.
I'm
I think
so
it's really
excited for
awesome.
that.
Me
Um,
too, man. Me
it's
too.
gonna make gunplay so much better.
Yeah, that's something I'm excited about. Rev kind of gave me this like, don't care look, which is fine, which is fine. But I'm very excited for it. Parallaxing. I did not know that's what it's called, but thank you
It-
for that. I'm gonna look that up a little bit later.
yeah, parallax error is the error that you get when you look at something like a compass or anything with like a projected thing at an odd angle, and it causes it to be kind of off center.
I see. I see.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
like if you're reading a clock and you're looking at it from an angle, you don't see the hand directly over the number because of the
That
parallax
makes
error.
sense. Yeah, 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 yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. So from that, here is something that actually Mike kind of read between the lines and caught this. They did some work on lockers, like suit lockers. They mentioned that there was work on implementing lockers, not just like in ships, but around stations to allow players to go in and change inventories and loadouts and stuff for in their words. I think it said like geared for whatever you're planning to do, like appropriate gear for your adventures, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, super looking forward to anything locker and inventory and storage related. Anything that brings stuff that's just a widget or a sprite on the screen into full 3D in the game. Super looking forward to that.
yeah, the only thing is I don't think that's gonna be coming yet. Titan suits. Yeah. I
Oh,
don't
thank you,
think
whoever said that.
that was Ritalin in chat.
God bless you, man, for remembering.
I think
um,
I'm pretty optimistic, but I don't think that's coming for like the next 2 years.
it'll be a little bit.
Well,
It'll be a
I
little
mean,
bit.
according to legend, it's supposed to be part of Squadron 42. So
Yeah, well, hopefully, right?
hopefully, God,
But
Saint Tony willing.
yeah, regarding lockers though, I don't think they're gonna be in 323 because I'm almost certain that that's gonna have to rely on the replication layer split because it's gonna be a lot of things to store, especially like you say, if they render them in 3D, right? If you can visibly see what's in there, that's entities, and I think that that's
Yeah,
gonna
but
be
that's coming in 323.
well. It
Well, actually,
We'll
can I
we'll
make an
we'll, we'll get
observation?
yeah, sure. We'll get to it, but it whatever. Go ahead, Cyber.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, if you just from memory, suit lockers that are in ships are the ones that tend to have the transparent front. But if you go to a station and look at the lockers, like Grimhex or Everest or something like that, they're just like yellow and black plated lockers, like you would have in a high school. Like they're not actually
That's
transparent. So that
true.
that might
They're
be a
also
way that
old
they're.
assets, and they might be reworking them to
I mean,
open.
that's true too. I was just thinking that to your point of the entities, like that might be a way they mitigate that. Is that like
Yeah, like
unless
a virtual
it's
storage.
yeah, like unless it's in a sequestered ship where only a few people need that information, it just makes it like you just open and close the
Yeah,
locker and it's open.
I I the reason I don't think it's gonna be like that, right, is because if that's how they were gonna do it, where you just click it and you could view it, they would have included that with the inventory system because it's basically a
Probably.
box,
That's a
right?
great thought.
With lockers being their own thing, right? I can only imagine that it's going to be a situation where that locker's gonna, open up and it's gonna be a click button. They showed an animation in a video somewhere briefly. I think it might
It
have been
was
CitizenCon or something.
it was
But
2016 CitizenCon where they had that ship
no,
locker.
there was
And
one. There was one newer. There was one
was
newer.
there?
I think
That's
it
the
was
only time I remember
CitizenCon.
seeing a locker of any sorts was that video, just because how infamous that video is.
Yeah, I think there was one at CitizenCon, but it showed. I think it might have even been the Corsair demo or something. But the lockers there, the doors open. And he like reached out, grabbed, and then it like did a quick fade to black, and the outfit switched. Right.
Oh,
So the idea behind lockers is that you don't have to go into your inventory screen to change. And it's just a quick flipperoo, right? At least that's what I'm understanding. And so if
Right.
they were going to do it that way, where it just opens the inventory UI and you have to do it, like there's no reason to make lockers a thing. Just make them boxes, right?
Right. I
And
mean,
they've already got that.
that's a very keen insight on your part. In terms of like if it were that way, they would have done it already. Because
Right.
that would have been such a quality of life.
Right, and Ritalin says unless the personal lockers would need the rep layer to function properly across other servers, that's another point, right? You
Right.
rent a locker, you put your shit in there, you log get into a new fucking server,
Yeah.
suddenly, oh,
Yeah.
oh,
There you
oh, where's
go.
my
Yeah.
locker, right? So,
Right.
so that's another good point. So that's just a cool thing. I've been looking forward to lockers since I first laid eyes on one. But
Well, and
it,
that's a really good dovetail into the topics ahead in terms of
it
server
is,
meshing.
it
Yeah.
is, and we'll get there soon too. Just one last thing is that with the lockers being in place, Mike said, "Hey, I really hope that means that are they gonna start limiting wearing armor when you're flying?" Which, as some of us
it's
know,
needed.
was
It's needed.
was the plan, right?
Yeah.
So you get in
I
these heavy, heavy armor suits. The idea is that you're not supposed to be able to fly, or that there's a penalty to flying.
Yeah.
right.
So maybe this is gonna be the start of that.
Yeah. A long time ago, they they had floated, and the old heavy armor was this way. It was I honestly kind of missed, it, but they had floated that like heavy armor would just restrict your visibility. But they've thankfully wizened up away from that in terms of like where in the future we just wouldn't design helmets that have visual obstructions, and now it's going to be something more like if you're wearing the heavy armor, you literally cannot fit in the cockpit, or if you can't turn, like the ship is not as responsive
Yeah, like
because
there's a penalty. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and so like it's not just something arbitrary like I'm half blind, for no fucking reason. Like it's something more intelligent and subtle than that, which I'm pleased with.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the time when people who are on like big ships, multi-crew ships, they don't have a reason to wear armor, so they don't, right?
Right.
So they just wear
Yes.
clothes.
Please give me functional civilian clothes. Give
Didn't
us
they show that
reasons to
off a
just
little
wear
bit at
clothes. They
Yeah,
CitizenCon
did.
where you were
They
showing
did.
the
We're gonna get
pouches
pouches
and
and pockets.
yeah,
and I'm so
absolutely,
excited.
right? So pouches for tools and shit for you to do the engineering gameplay, right? Oh, super cool.
Yeah, I think that the way to make that work, like the only way to make that work, is to make wearing regular clothes more useful in terms of capacity than wearing any kind of armor with a backpack,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
Otherwise,
for,
everyone's all
for the gameplay loop that you want to focus on, yes, right. So like if you're flying, if you're just getting from point A to point B for the purpose of hopping out and do FPS, right? That's one thing. But if the purpose, if you're dressing for the purpose of being an engineer, though that civilian clothes should be more useful than any version of armor you could be wearing.
agreed. Agreed. But anyway, we've talked about that a lot. So moving on. This was on the monthly report, and Avenger One put out a video recently about master modes. We know it's coming very soon. Um, they did say that they are still actively tuning master modes, and they said that they're only about 90% done with setting up all the ships that they want to be set up. Right, there's still a significant way to go. Um, it feels good, I think, right? And we need to see how it works in the hands of the wider PU. It seems pretty split right now. Some people really love it, some people really hate it, but we'll see. But Master Modes is still tuning. I actually haven't tried it,
I've tried it. I liked it.
but I hear good things.
I know a lot of PvP people don't like it, like Avenger One.
Yeah,
Um,
he doesn't like it at all, right?
yeah,
I can't actually say one way or the other, but for those of you who are saying, "Oh, it's terrible," or "Oh, it's really, really good," just please keep in mind it's still not done. They're still tuning. It's not out yet.
Y-
Give it some
y-
time in the PU, and then CIG has a history of overcorrecting anyway. So even if it is kind of bad, they'll dial it back again. Right?
Yeah. So
yeah.
in what it seems to me is that those people who have historically been very good at like dogfighting with the old flight model, obviously those are the guys who don't like it because it takes away their high speed. It takes away some of the specific things that allowed them to be as good as they are, and they're having to adjust, right? So good or bad, I understand why they don't like it,
Yeah.
but I think it's really important to step back and to look at what the issues were that CIG was trying to fix, and did these changes actually, hit the mark as far as making those corrections?
Right.
I think in general it did. They were trying to close in combat. They were trying to make it so that the people who are less twitchy have a little bit more fun with the combat. They were trying to do to make multiplayer ships with turrets and stuff more effective against fighters, right? And by bringing it's succeeded at all of those things at the cost of the fighters don't dominate like they used to.
Right.
And I don't think
I
that's
can see
necessarily a bad thing.
I can see both. I can see both sides, right? Because here's the thing: most people are not going to spend several hours a day mastering this craft. Okay. But the top 1% who do, I feel like they deserve to be rewarded for it.
Well,
And
yes.
if you're putting such a low ceiling on the skill cap by keeping speeds at 200 meters per second, then it doesn't matter how good you get. There's only so much difference that skill is going to award you. So I am not a very good dog fighter, and I know that. But when I see somebody who I know spends hours a day in the pilot seat and he fucks me up, I don't get mad at the flight model over it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So you know, I don't get mad at the flight model over it. So something that, you know, Phaedron has said, the only thing I agree with A1 on about master mode is that the speed envelope could use more depth. 200 meters per second is a little sludgy. Something to consider, in my own opinion, is 200 meters per second is still like 450 miles an hour or something like that. Like it's still fucking fast. So
Yeah.
in like a thick atmosphere, I can imagine 400 fit 200 meters per second being plenty, right? I do agree that in space or in a very thin atmosphere, we can up that or have a scale where as you get into thinner atmosphere, that speed increases and that speed gap becomes something like 4 or 500 meters per second,
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
like
right?
I
450,
mean,
500.
I
I
wouldn't have
actually
a problem with that if maybe they adjust inertia a little bit, right? To make it a little slower to get to that max. And if you hit that max, to be able to change that, like when you flip around and try to fight against it. I mean,
Mhm.
well,
you shouldn't be able to
I,
just instantly stop and go the other way.
I
There's
agree
got to
with
be
that as well.
there's got to
it,
be
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
some
here's the
consequence of
also
hitting
the
those
thing,
speeds.
right? That's another argument for the atmosphere versus space thing, right? Because the amount of force it takes you to stop at a certain speed in atmosphere is going to be more than it takes you to stop in space at that speed because there's gravity and wind resistance,
I'm thinking
etc.
it's going to be
Right?
less because the atmosphere itself is going to
yeah,
be
those are the
working
things that are trying
against
to
the
bring.
motion.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It's okay.
You're right. I had it backwards, but you're right.
We understand what you meant.
Different though. It's going to be
Different.
different,
Yeah,
right? Maintaining
absolutely.
that speed, getting to speed is going to be harder. It might be quicker to slow down in atmosphere, but harder to speed up, and that's kind of the flip side, right? Um, so yeah, I think that atmosphere is going to be the big difference there, and there needs to be a significant difference in
Agreed.
flying in atmosphere versus in space. I
Uh,
think that speed cap is one of them.
Yeah, and I think we're
definitely.
gonna see a whole different skill in terms of space and
I
then
hope we do,
atmosphere.
especially with control
Yeah.
surfaces.
Yeah, and
If
that's
I
not
could,
coming until later. That's the unfortunate
It's
part of
not. It's not. So
2023.
we don't have to get deep into that. I'm just
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
I was just going to try to draw some of these threads together before we move on from this topic.
of course.
So one of the fundamental things that you guys have touched on is the fact that Star Citizen is in some ways trying to be as, in their words, believable as possible. Like, for example, they want their ships to fly like spaceships and be able to go fast and fly through the atmosphere and fly between planets at like a reasonable but not boring, speed. And so like when you were talking about changing the inertia rev, what the quandary that CIG is in is it's like, well, we need the ships to be able to change their speed and inertia fast enough to dogfight or to leave the atmosphere or whatever. But we also, like, if they're that strong, they're also strong enough to just hover in place forever or, completely come to a stop by inverting themselves and putting their afterburners into the turn. And so like that's like a catch 22 that I'm always sympathetic to them, but the reason I try to mention that is that the decision they made, like you were talking about, Dev, they had to, or Rev, they had to balance, like, okay, we cannot make literally the perfect space sim because it would be the expanse and we would fight at thousands of miles per hour, so like celestial bodies
Yeah,
distances
from a
apart.
million meters
Right, and
away and
yeah, so like as cool as the expanse is, that's not the game Star Citizen's trying to make because that's not a fun multiplayer game to play, for most people. And so
right.
this is where they have to make this compromise where they're like, okay, we want things to be compelling, we want them to be believable, and when people do succeed and do practice, because the CR himself has talked about, he wants the game to be like Dark Souls where like it rewards you for playing well. So like I don't think they're going to ever end up after years of adjusting. It's not going to be in a place where it's like the best people aren't rewarded for being the best. And I'm not
Right.
saying, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be hyperbolic, but I'm just saying, like, I don't
No,
think
I get
that's,
it.
they're worried about that too.
Well,
But in any case, the point I was trying to bring this towards was that when they make these compromises, they're like, well, we have these, this game, we want it to feel like space, and we have these cool spaceships and stuff, but we want to show them, but all the combat is happening so fast that you never really see them. They're like a little glint, and like if you can shoot them, then you have to hope that the net code is on your side because the actual time and like overlap of pixels is so small that it can get lost in 100 milliseconds. And so like that was in my opinion more than like that was a more important thing to solve than like the skill gap was like making it work well in terms of reliable hitting and like that sort of thing. And not to mention the whole like slowing down the ships but speeding up the projectiles so that you can be effective at like 3 or 4 kilometers with a ballistic weapon like you can in real life. And so like not only that, but like being able to do like turret gameplay in terms of like them buffing the turrets by giving them all little gyros, like all of it, regardless of how you feel about those individual balance changes, all of it is just trying to push in toward like a fun kind of World War II flight simi thing that can also be believed as space flight.
Yeah.
And so like that's I think if we just recognize that, I think all of this becomes a little easier to swallow because they're not trying to solve the problem of people are jousting and we don't like that. They're actually
Right.
focused on much more fundamental things like we want people to feel like they have control of what they're doing. We want people to feel like it's approachable, but also worth investing their time in mastering, and
Yeah.
as a dedicated but shitty pilot myself, I can say that like at at the point that's like from where it's been to where it is now, Star Citizen has only become a deeper and more intricate combat experience. So I don't think
Absolutely.
it's in jeopardy of becoming too simple. And I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
Cool.
Well, no,
I want to point out something silly that I saw on Facebook on the topic, where
Yeah.
somebody said they should just get rid of tricording. To which I say, first of all, how?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Well, Master Mode's
that's
kind
pretty
of.
out there.
I mean, Master Mode's fixes tricording, right? And
But you can
LTTs
still
are
do it.
you can. It's just not nearly as effective, right? You can still tricord because you can utilize those thrusters, but it's not as you don't go as fast as if you utilize just your mains,
And
right?
like the
They've
scientist
fixed
in
that.
me totally hates that that's not a thing anymore. Even though it's something that I struggle to do and or fight against, it's like I'm glad that you can use a spaceship like a spaceship and like no, I'd like to have 10 instead of 8 rockets pushing me in that direction. And like and yes, the math should work out that it's more. But I also understand that they've got other considerations to balance. So
Right,
I'm willing to
right.
be patient.
So just two more quick bits on master modes. Phaedron said one more thing that I agree with, right? And this is part of that tuning thing. Avenger One did have a great idea that I also agree with. Base recharge of shields and smaller ships would have to overcome the damage to overcome that base recharge of shields before they started dealing damage. A quick example, right, is if you've got a Gladius that deals 1,000 DPS and you have, say, a Hammerhead or bigger whose shield would generate 2,000 hit points per second, then one Gladius is not going to be enough to even deal damage, right? Get that shield down,
Right.
right? So you essentially have to produce 2,000 DPS in order to start hitting that shield down, right?
So you need like 3 or 4 Gladiuses
Right.
down a
And but that makes that starts to make sense. If you've got
Right.
3 or 4 fighters consistently firing on a hammerhead, and it's like, oh, suddenly, oh, hey, we might have a problem here, guys. Fucking wake
Right.
up,
And not
right?
only like with how dangerous turrets, how dangerous they want and turrets need to be so that they're worth using. That makes sense. Like
Indeed.
it's like if a single incredibly well trained pilot could reliably destroy a gunship like a hammerhead, it's like you wouldn't build them that way. They're an
Right.
ineffectual machine. Like no one would
Exactly.
use it. So
And
Right.
we're also getting precision aiming, so now you're gonna see those 3 or 4 Gladius taking out
yes,
one turret and then
yes.
moving on to the other turret, and
Thank you, Mike.
so on and
Yes.
so on. And that would actually make sense
And
Yeah,
and
for a
that
and
and
it'll
like
Gladius to
mitigate
take
that.
down the hammerheads.
and not only that, but like I think we experienced this the other week when we were trying to board the Idris, but like already in the game, it is actually meaningful to target something's engines because like if you crack an engine off of it, it'll just stutter in a circle,
Right.
and like the that's where Star Citizen, in my opinion, to new players will start to really feel much more like an MMO because there's going to be a kind of a process to tackling group activities like that. It's not going to be like it is now, where it's like, yeah, we all have to coordinate and have each other's backs and be smart, but like we all are just shooting the target together, and like that'll still work, but it'll be much more effective if it's like, okay, guys, we're going to shoot the starboard flank turret, and like eliminate the DPS, you know.
Exactly. Eliminate the
Yeah,
DPS.
and it'll
So
start to feel like a mini boss.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And it
So
should.
so
and it
yep,
should.
that's a good point that I thought A1 had, and thank you, Phaedron, for reminding me to bring that up. But the second thing, which is going to kind of lead us into the next part of the roadmap update, the monthly report, I mean, is you, Cyberpunk, actually talked about how they're shifting ships, right? And how they are going to balance that. You know, if a ship is powerful enough to leave atmosphere quick enough, then in theory it should be powerful enough to hover there,
Right.
right? Well, they're working on the overheating function,
Oh, nice.
and
Love that.
they are adding something to the engineering gameplay, cooling systems. With coolant,
Awesome.
you actually have to maintain a coolant level. So
Oh,
uh, uh, there's a physical component to overheating, and if you were to say spring a coolant leak, you got a
or
problem.
take like a penetrating shot and blow a
Or
coolant line. Like,
exactly, exactly. So
fuck
that
yes.
was a really cool part that kind of ties into what we were talking about that I am so excited for.
So I get the
Just
impression, Cyber, that that you're looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, sorry for that live reaction chat, but like this is news to me. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. Coolant and cooling systems overheating definitely going to be a thing. And that's going to be part of that balance to where, yeah, no, CIG doesn't want ships just hovering there. If you have VTOL or hover mode, that's one thing. Like the Santok Yai, its maneuvering thrusters are its main thrusters. If you want to hover there, it's not going to be a problem for a ship like the Santok Yai. A ship like a Cutlass that's got those, you know, their main thrusters boom into VTOLs, not going to be a problem for it to hover there. But something like a Gladius, where it has to rely on maneuvering thrusters to hover in a spot like
Right.
that, it's going to be much tougher because you're going to be like pumping those maneuvering thrusters and they're going to get hot and suddenly you're
And,
going to have problems.
and not only that, just I guess a final little dovetail back into master modes, because things like gladiuses and sabers and stuff like that won't be able to just hover there like a hot air balloon. They're going to have to use their control surfaces to reduce the load on their vertical thrusters through lift,
Absolutely.
which means they're going
Absolutely.
to have to keep their speed up. And so like
Hmm.
that's going to add another layer to the aerial combat of like, well, I've been pirouetting in like a nice 100-meter circle shooting at MD, you know, and I'm like, it's been great. I'm shooting him all that stuff, but all of a sudden I'm falling because by
And
doing that
yeah,
type maneuver, I've burned out my shit.
and let's talk about just one last thing. You mentioned the scientists in you, okay? I'm speculating here. I don't know if it's going to become this in depth, but something to consider from a scientific perspective is that when you're in space, there's nothing to dissipate the heat produced by your engines, right? There's no air to take the heat away. It just continues to generate and generate and generate. In fact, our space shuttles, right? They dissipate heat through light via infrared, right? They just get it so fucking hot that it turns red and dissipates heat through light, right? So if you start overheating your ship in space, which is going to be possible, then you might
Right.
have to say, "Fuck, I have to stop utilizing my maneuvering thrusters so hard and push for an atmospheric fight to where you can basically stop using them and utilize your control surfaces." Just an idea. Just an
That's
idea. I
yeah.
don't know if that's actually going to be.
Well,
That's speculation there.
well, I would only, you know, in all fairness, the only critique I would levy upon that would be like that would only be relevant if you're fighting on like the border between like if you could get to atmosphere to solve that
True.
problem.
That is
You know,
true. That is
but
true.
I can foresee a situation in that would where that would be happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've talked a whole lot about ships, right? We're gonna talk. I guess the last thing. There's one more thing on ships here. Um, that actually, Cyber, you mentioned when we were playing just earlier. Um, somebody brought up the Reclaimer because the Pyro Freelancer Core have Wednesday night we do salvage, and Aegis has a Reclaimer out, and they were talking about why he's like, why is my quantum drive so slow? It's got a capital class quantum drive, and Cyber pointed out, he said, no, you've got a capital class jump drive. So let's talk really quick about the differences because it's in the monthly report. Jump drives are what allow ships to traverse through jump gates, and they are different than quantum drives, which are what basically puts you in this quantum bubble to throw you through space. So some ships, they specified this in the monthly report because they're working on jump gates and they're working on the drives. Some ships are not going to have jump drives. So
You mean my saber may not be able to go through the jump point?
What about my Fury?
Things like your Fury especially won't. But yeah, things like fighters, right, or some small ships will not be able to go through jump points. I'm just throwing this out here as a consideration for anybody who might be listening that is maybe stuck in like a Mustang, right? Like, hey, maybe start thinking about what you want to do.
Yes, the
You know?
Kraken. Yes, the Kraken.
Yes, yes, the Kraken.
Yes.
But
Fuck the Liberator. Yes, the Kraken.
I also agree with that statement. The Kraken is
yeah,
a work of, although asymmetric, beautiful starship craft.
It
So I
is
actually,
artistic perfection. It's
It
beautiful.
is,
As a concept.
especially when it's landed.
Ugh.
so I'm glad you actually brought that up. Some ships are not gonna be able to jump. So there is the whole sea, and they showed earlier this last year that there are ships attached to the hull or where the cargo grid.
yeah, like auroras and shit.
So that's gonna be another way of transporting ships, not just with the
Very
Kraken
small
or the
ships,
Liberator.
but
Okay.
yes,
Like
very
That's
small
fucking
ships.
Gladius,
awesome.
the
That's
Gladius arrows, the
Gladius arrows,
MPUVs.
yeah,
I
auroras. You can
just
just park them right on
Yeah.
the whole sea, definitely.
I just need to point out how that is an unexpected but completely like intended development of Star Citizen's development process, because like, people, this is one of those things where I'll point to and be like, this is why it was good that they took so long to build all these systems, because that can only happen because of all the different like moving physics grid stuff that CR coded, and like all the groundwork that went into everything that would allow, like, well, actually, yeah, we can do this with crates, but the way we handle crates in the data structure is the same way we handle ships. So like we can just do this with ships, right? They're like, actually, yeah, we can. Holy crap, get this
Actually,
guy a raise.
wow, you had a good
Like
fucking
that's
idea.
how I imagine these meetings go. And those things can happen because they build these things so thoroughly,
Yeah.
and
Agreed.
Yeah.
and that's the payoff.
Yeah. In one of the recent, what is it? Inside Star Citizens, actually Star System Lives, there was some talk about how, because they build systems, right? They don't build uh, bespoke instances of you can do this particular thing in this particular location in this instance. They have a system that allows it to happen, so that you can have these cases where somebody just says, "Hey, I wonder what'll happen if we try to do X." And in this particular case, they said, "Well, what if you're in quantum in a constellation, and you undock your Archimedes? What happens?"
In Star Citizen, you can find out.
You can find out, and it's systemic, right? And I think what happened, it's either one of two things happens. Either you just drop out because the Archimedes doesn't have, or the whatever, it doesn't have a jump drive, or you stay in the warp bubble of the constellation. And whatever ship it was they were talking about, the ship stayed in warp,
Wow.
in quantum, and they're like, "Holy crap, that is cool as hell." Okay, well then maybe it's not the Archimedes, but there was a case where they tried, this decoupling of ships, and it was interesting that it worked like the way they would have expected that maybe it should,
Right.
and they
And
didn't have to do
like
anything to make it happen. They're just like, "Holy crap, I guess it works."
Yeah. And honestly such a smart move on their part to endorse that in terms of putting ships on a hull C, because like the Liberator's not in the game yet,
Right,
so
you
like
gotta have some way to
it's
get those ships over there.
it's filling the gap, and although, I mean, as you were describing it, I was thinking to myself like, man, that's kind of scummy, because if you want to have the experience of going through the jump point, you've got to either know somebody who has a multi-crew ship or get one. And like, it's not scummy, because like you can just play the game in 0 to hero and get yourself a Cutlass or whatever would have a jump drive, but like I'm glad that like they're making ways that you can just piggyback more easily, um because although I'm not one of them, like I know the vast majority of citizens are just Aurora owners.
Yeah, well, the thing is there's enough people that are going to have ships large enough to have cargo bays, flight bays, whatever, that they can contract and say, "Hey, man, I need to take my Aurora to this other system.
Right.
I'll pay you. How much would you charge me? It'll be so much." And great, and you land and you pay somebody to take you. I love that that idea,
Right.
that very
Player-driven
necessary,
economy, yeah.
exactly, player-driven economy that needs to
Emergent
engage
gameplay.
other players in order to accomplish the gameplay that you want.
Right.
I
Fucking love
also
it.
feel like with those starter ships, they gotta have those because people who just started playing Star Citizen, when all that stuff comes into the game, they're if they want to explore, maybe they'll want to end up in Stanton. Maybe they want to go to Magnus or Pyro.
Right.
Like, why not have those ships have those jump drives just so they can do it and not be
Well,
limited?
it's one of those things where there's different sizes of the jump drives. So something like a Terrapin, I know has a jump drive because it's an exploration ship.
Right.
So it's not like your ship has to be at least 2 stories tall to have a jump drive. Um, it's um it's just like purpose, you know. So
Yeah.
like there isn't a jump drive on an Arrow. I don't believe there's a jump drive on a Gladius or a Saber, or a Hornet. But there is a jump drive on a Vanguard. There definitely is a what-
Probably on the anvil, what you call it? The Hurricane?
yeah, the multi-crew like ones where they have a turret and just because they have space for it. You know, and stuff that's supposed to fit inside of another ship, you know, like kind of like the Gladius does in the Idris. Like it's kind of designed to have something else to carry it around. Um, but in any way, the thing about the jump drives that I think is a or the jump points that's important to note too is that although this won't be in tier 0, the way that they've established the jump point system is that there's principal jump points that are like the ones we know of now that have the big gates that stabilize them and stuff like that, and they're huge, you know. But there's also little bitty ones that are like not permanent, and that's going to be an element of future exploration gameplay. Is like a ship like a Carrack or a Terrapin will have to go exploring in the area around like the nebula of the jump point, and they'll have to find little locations where it's like, oh, here's a point where your jump drive can induce a like wormhole that you can fly through, and
Or the
that's
Herald?
yeah, and things like that, you know, like things that are
MSR.
meant to go between systems and carry information would necessarily have to have a jump drive, because that's the whole
Right.
point, is like we need to go way beyond what light can reach.
So they would probably need a new scanning system because the new scanning system is supposed to be like 250,000 kilometers, wherever how far it is. Uh,
Right.
Yeah, we'll get there. We're kind of going
yeah,
off on some tangents. I'm gonna keep us moving along
Yeah,
here.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be. I'm just gonna touch on a couple more, and then we'll get into server meshing. Distribution
Yes.
centers are nearly done. It's going through LODs and
Yeah.
lighting passes and such. So that's great news on the distribution centers. They are finalizing work on the instanced gateways for hangars, right? The individualized hangars. So they're figuring out at what point do we want a gateway to be created and how does it connect between the instance hanger and the rest of the server, right? So they're finalizing work on that, which is very exciting for things like freight elevators and persistent hangars, yada yada
Yep.
yada.
Top of my list.
Awesome stuff.
So hyped
um
for freight elevators.
yes.
so with freight elevators, I'm actually really excited for you, Cyber, because now salvaging, you're gonna be able to take those components
Yes.
off, put them in your freight elevator, and then you're actually gonna be able to sell to players. Because who knows what 323 is gonna be? It could be where they take away all of the grade A military
Yeah,
equipment because
and
they're redoing the economy.
they definitely have done that kind of thing in the past. Like in Stanton, you can't buy railguns or snipers or
Or
guns like that at a store.
FS9s.
Or LMGs. Yeah, you can't buy those at a store anymore, and so the primary means of getting them, if you don't wanna go out and farm yourself, is to buy from other players. So I was actually with salvage being the way it is, I think it's because you can't drag and drop to local inventory yet. But you're right,
Mhm.
with freight elevators, that might change, and so he's exactly right. They might
Yeah.
take out all of the most popular guns, right?
And
Such
shield
as
components like the
yeah,
FR-76s, the
exactly, the grade A
FR-86s.
military, so that you can take those components from other ships and then influence
Right.
trade that way. So, but
Yeah.
we'll move on from that. Just two more cool things. The mission team is working diligently to bring us better mission content, and I'm not just talking about contracts on your contract manager. I'm talking about you go somewhere, you speak to somebody, and they send you on an actual mission with actual people to communicate with, bespoke dialogue for these missions, etc. So it actually gets that RPG sort of feel. You walk
Oh,
up to
nice.
somebody and says, "Hey, I need help. Hello, adventurer," kind of things, you know.
Hello,
So
adventurer. That's
exactly, yeah.
I used to
So
be an adventurer like you that took an arrow in the knee.
exactly. So, there's actual people to talk to, and it doesn't feel like you're just looking at a screen, reading things, and then shooting robots, right? Like that's what it feels like right now. And they're working very hard and making great progress to do that, kind of like the Eckhart mission, but even better, right? And then the last thing, which is really gonna finally segue us into what this whole podcast, the main topic here, is they have officially completed a jump between Stanton and Pyro, utilizing the jump gate that was also a transfer from server A to server B. So, in terms of, yeah, clap, clap, clap. In terms of jump gates and server meshing that way, it is officially working in an internal build.
yes, a jump gate, server mesh, replication layer, the
Yeah,
whole,
and
Everything.
like
all of the
It's
pieces.
coming. It's
I
finally coming.
yeah, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I cannot overstate how much I have to say on this topic simply from the perspective of like how long this plan has been moving in this direction. And like this inflection point, like I I don't think it's that much of an overstatement to say that this feels like a moon landing Houston moment. Like I'm sure that when that worked, when the data appeared in server two, 2, and they all loaded in and everything was fine or whatever, I'm sure that like people cried, people stood up out of their chairs and clapped. Like, because they had been working on this since devs were talking about how the idea of doing it made them cry in 2015.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, this
on
is over
like
a
that's
decade
not
in
an
the making.
exaggeration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rinolin points
That's
out that it worked, but it was pretty unstable. I'll take unstable and working at this point.
Do you
Absolutely.
remember 318? PES was working and horribly unstable. Do you remember 3.0? I don't, but I've heard the tales. It was working but completely unstable.
oh yeah, it was
Unstable is always going to be step 1, and I'm
10
okay
to
with it.
15 FPS and 3.0 and then
Yeah,
crashing like
and
every
look at
30
where we are
minutes.
now, right? We're in 322.1 right now, and it's some of the most stable gameplay we've ever had.
Yeah,
And
I'll
we've got
take the
PES fully
replication.
working.
I'll take the replication later and the end of the 30K,
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
or
And
at least
Yeah.
in its current state. I'll take it.
and
Exactly. Yeah.
and you know what? I think that's actually probably the most like important high level thing to talk about in terms of like the real what does this mean for the average person playing Star Citizen? And that is the biggest problem playing Star Citizen is thus. You start playing it, you're like, holy fucking shit, this is amazing. I'm gonna pour so much time and effort into this. I'm gonna zero to hero. I'm gonna get my ideal armor. I'm gonna save up and get a Carrack or whatever. And like halfway to doing that, you 30K with a fucking full cargo load of like exactly, and like we've all been there, not one, not two, hundreds of times because the game is so good that we're like, fuck it, we'll do it again. This time we'll fucking have a contingency, it'll work, and like
Right.
basically this is the biggest example of Star Citizen getting out of its own way as a game that you can enjoy. Because just like
Yeah.
bed logging and everything, like it's going to allow for continuity. It's not going to be like, well, shit, I just wasted an entire Saturday afternoon because I really wanted to get whatever it was I was saving up for, and now all of it's fucking gone.
I still remember the
Or
days of rock mining and having a
Yep.
full rock, heading to pull Olisar, and right when I get there, 30K.
Yep.
right.
Nothing quite like taking a whole sea, throwing like 3 to 5 million worth of like your entire stockpile of cash, loading up that thing, getting into quantum 30K, and now you
Right.
lost the cargo and you're broke and you're like, motherfuck.
Yeah.
Right.
So 30Ks are over. So yeah, we're talking about this. The jump that we're there is just going to segue us to talk about server meshing. So I mean, we've already gotten pretty excited about it, but really quick, let's just say what server meshing is, right?
Oh yes.
Let's talk about what server meshing is, what server meshing means as a whole for Star Citizen, aside from what we now know will be the death of 30K, right? Um, what it means for the game. So server meshing, Rev. I think you've got a pretty articulate way of explaining this as a software guy yourself. Would you care to take the wheel for a moment?
Yeah, I don't know that it's all that articulate, but I mean, basically server meshing, right? So the idea is to take the entire, uh, the entire Star Citizen universe and to break it into chunks and allow certain sections to be all handled by a single server, right? It may be a large section, it could be like an entire star system. Depending on the load, it could long term, it could be individual planets, it could be an entire a city for very large ships. It could be a single ship, right? That a single server or a single shard is dealing with, and the meshing is a system whereby you can transition from one server to another seamless. From the player perspective, you don't even know that it's happening, right? And system to system, just map to map, and it's just seamless, no load screens. It's one of the things that Star Citizen is so good at now, is this idea that there are no load screens, right? But then to be able to take all of these bits and pieces and put them on individual servers and have them connected in such a way that you can transition from one to another, uh, creates then a world where we can have untold numbers of people literally in the same instance of the universe, hundreds, potentially thousands of people that you could just run into at any given time. And it's that seamless transition from server to server to server to create a seamless world, or a seamless universe in this case. It I mean, that's server meshing, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean that's
Sounds
exactly
amazing.
right. So Ritalin brings up the replication layer, right? So the replication layer is sort of what makes this all possible. Right. You can imagine the replication layer as a third party between the client and the server, where the replication layer is an entity graph that stores the states and positions of entities. This is going to be the coffee cup that you set down. It's going to be your own person, right? It's going to be the armor you're wearing, the gun that you're holding. It's going to be the gown that the dude just took off because he walked out of the hospital and threw it on the ground before
So
he went to the ASOP
yeah,
terminals.
I would describe it like this, right? So we've got the replication layer. You might think of the replication layer as the layer that renders everything for you, and the actual servers being everything that's keeping track of the locations of things, what is actually in the universe, where you are, speeds, directions, all of the nuts and bolts of what exists, where it exists, and what state it exists in. And then the replication layer is what shows it to you.
I think you got it backwards.
No, definitely not.
Well, yeah, because if a server crashes, right, the replication layer is what's saving all of that data.
Well, yeah, it
And the
has
server is what shows it to you.
no, it's the replication layer. It has the current location and stuff, but the server is still the thing that is. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so I think what you're what Bev was trying to say is that like the replication layer the is the hard drive and the server is the RAM. The server is actively doing things, changing states and relaying that information to clients. But like in the process of that back and forth, the replication layer is remembering and logging of like, oh well now the can is here and now it's here again and now it's over there again. And like
That's
it's doing
right,
that with everything. But like
right.
but what Dev is saying is that like the server is what's what's generating the change on the values the replication layer is remembering.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
why
Yes.
when we have like a server crash, the replication layer becomes static because the server's not
Right.
telling it to change anything. It's not tell so then it just like, oh well, this is what it was at the time the server went down, so this is what I'm still giving you.
Right.
And as soon as it comes
Correct.
back up, it says, "Hey server, this is the state of everything." And then the server goes, "Okay, great. Let me continue on with what was going on before the crash."
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Yes.
And
I
and
think we
and
have the
if I'm
same thing in mind. We were just thinking of it differently.
Yeah.
yeah, the other good thing about that is that it all kind of ties in together, server meshing and the protection from 30K and switching between servers, because if you have, let's say, like the Gadsby, it's that 890 but it's got like 50 people on it or whatever, and it's like, sure, servers can run 100 or whatever, but like it's its own server, and someone flies up to the Gadsby. Well, that server needs to tell the server of the person flying up to it that, hey, there's an 890 here, and if you look in the window, you're going to see these people. And so like that kind of information, I think, is a kind of I should say that that kind of circumstance is another interesting way to think about the server meshing, because like not only is the server that is the 890, managing everything that's in there, the replication layer is telling the other person who's on a different server, hey, this is what you would see if you looked inside the window of the 890 jump.
Yeah,
And like
and you're
and
absolutely
what's
right. There's
profound about what's profound about that is that like every other game before this has just had what you can't see through the windows, like, and then when you go up to the door, there's a loading screen, and now you're in the server, and
right.
so like it's
There's another piece of this that we haven't mentioned, and that's that. So quantum, right?
yeah,
The server is likely going to be the piece handling all of that quantum information. And since the replication layer doesn't have to know about any of what's happening with the quantum system, which is that system that's maintaining like what all the NPCs that you can't see are doing, what's happening with the economy, et cetera, right? Replication layer doesn't need to know any of that until you come in contact with some quantum entity, and it then has to be rendered. So that's another piece of the server where now they can break that up and say, well, this is
right.
what's happening with all of these quantum entities in this area. I don't have to worry about what's happening in the other system, in the other planet, or whatever. I
Well,
just have to worry
actually,
about the quantum pieces in my area.
I think it's actually even more elegantly constructed than that, Rev, because if I'm not mistaken, Quantum, the system that would keep track of, well, we're selling this much ore at this place with this much demand for it at that place, and it takes this much time, and there's this many NPCs with this much likelihood of piracy. Like all those things are actually happening on like an actual back end service that is
Yeah, it's
then,
totally separate.
yeah.
Right, but there's
Well,
two layers to it, right? Because there's also
yeah.
still the actual NPC entities that you can't see that are actually doing things in the same way that players would be doing things.
And is that like the meshing stuff? That's what talks to everything? Or,
That's Tony
or
Z's
okay.
baby.
Yeah.
That's all hail Tony Z's
I'm
shit
not
So
right
I'm
there.
not
I'm
trying to
not
disagree
technical at
with.
all. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
Oh, it's okay.
listen and try to get
Oh yeah,
all this.
yeah. By all means, yeah. No, it's good to mention so that we can be clear for people who don't know these things. But so what we're talking about is a system that was unveiled at CitizenCon, I think 2016 or 17, which
16,
was
yeah.
which was essentially, hey, we want Star Citizen to have a dynamic player-driven economy. However, it's really really tough to do that and have it be meaningful, or if it possible to have even like a normal amount of missions, because like the player base isn't enough people to drive an economy or consistently enough. So they have to have
Right.
like an army of NPCs that are mathematically supporting the economy the players are slightly influencing the trajectory of. So
So
you
this
can't, the quandary was, we can't have the server actually focusing on rendering these hundreds of NPCs doing these jobs the players aren't doing. So we need a system that just does the math for us and then tells the server when a player, when it becomes relevant to a player. Like when they go to a kiosk, the answer to the question of how much does everything cost is determined by the quantum system. And to your point, Rev, the quantum system also, I'm not sure if this is current or soon to be in the future, but like the design is that like that also includes the NPC's physical location. So you
Right.
come across a place like Everest Harbor, and you see an NPC coming in to deliver shit that is part of the quantum equation, and like you
Right.
could crash into him or something. And so like there is an actual direct thing where the server will manifest those things, but it's only because a player is observing that tree fall in the woods.
That's right.
Until that point, it's all just handled in the back end to conserve resources. Which, back, hurrying back to Dev's point. Sorry to keep you waiting, Dev. Is that like
Don't be
this
sorry.
is
Don't be sorry.
this
This is
is
great.
this is all an elegant design to give the server as much computational bandwidth as possible for things like position and physics and all the things that like make the gameplay make sense, like Maelstrom. Like all that information is going to be available to the server to handle with more room, while the like very important but like like better to minimize the computational stuff of like background NPC marketing, like that's going to be updating to the replication layer, so the server just doesn't have to worry about it.
but we
The
should see
replication
like
layer is
a
like the
oh sorry,
root
I
of
didn't
the
mean to interrupt
world
you.
tree. No, I had that final thought, and I interrupted you. I apologize,
I was
it
just
was
gonna
that.
ask. Sorry.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Cyber. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that like really the replication layer is as profound as server meshing is. Like it's just really possible because the replication layer exists and
Right.
Right.
works. Like, please go
So
ahead,
Yeah.
Mike.
we should see if, like, for example, Stanton. Right now, we do mercenary work. You're gonna see bunkers all the time, but with Quanta, you may not see a bunker mission in Stanton. Is that what I'm kind of getting at?
What are you saying?
No.
No. Oh, okay.
We're, Mike, how much do you know about Quanta?
I know I know a little bit, but I'm not like you guys
Okay,
who like dive
question.
delve into
Have
it.
you, I'm going to ask you here, have
I've
you read
watched
the
the
Bible?
Tony's.
Okay.
I've watched the Tony Z video where he's going over a little bit, but it's been about like a year or two since I watched
Okay.
that. So
I try to encourage people to watch that once a year, right?
I'm about
Because
to rewatch that. It's been about a
you
year.
gotta stay updated. That is the Bible. All hail Tony Z.
Hail
And
Tony.
I'm
hail,
looking forward
yes,
to his
Hail
stuff.
Tony. Yeah.
I feel like this is
hail
like the
Tony
year
Z.
that's really gonna get his stuff going.
But no, it doesn't mean that you may not see bunkers in Stanton. What it means is that the quanta will determine when you see bunkers in Stanton.
Right.
Because the bunkers in Stanton right now, we have missions that say the Ninetales have taken over this bunker. Please go kill them. What Quanta is going to do is Quanta is going to determine when the Ninetales actually took over that bunker and generate the mission to do it. Because it's going to be a perfectly normal bunker doing bunker things, a secure facility where there's security in, and then Quanta will generate a Ninetales encounter where the Ninetales on the background not being rendered will come in, take over the facility, and boom, generate that mission for you to go
Right.
take it back.
Yeah.
That's what Quanta will do.
And
If I might,
it's entirely possible that if you happen to be sitting at the bunker at the time, you might see them come in, land, and go in to take over the bunker. Maybe.
That's exactly right.
yeah, and so this is actually the key thing about like one of the earliest things that Tony talks about in that lecture is basically the problem of Star Citizen is you can have this interaction where okay, there's a person selling something, they're traversing through space, they get attacked by a pirate, and they send out a message, and a player should get the message and come have this cool mission where they save this person. Well, unfortunately, the odds of those three things happening all at once such that the player would be able to go and do that in time before the pirate killed the NPC is like the odds of electrons colliding. You know, like it's so minute because space is so big and it takes so long, even with a quantum drive, go through it. You know, and so what the benefit of quantum is that it's all about probabilities. It's actually really high level math, but basically it's like there's this network of we have this supply, this demand, this many people willing to go through this much risk to go transport these things, and now we have players moving around that system, and we would like to generate missions based on those npcs like a distress call like I described. And so what it'll do is be like, oh, there's a player here all of a sudden. Well, I'll take one of these npcs that's selling stuff or transporting it out of that realm of possibility where like his position hasn't really been written in stone yet. Like he's just part of a table that the back end is running. And he's going to like move him out of his timeline into a different timeline where he took a little bit longer of a route or something. And he's in the right place at the right time. But he's still, if he dies, it's still subtracting from the actual economy. It's just moving things around a little bit so that the interactions are more frequent. And so that's same thing with bunkers. It's like, so there are NPC bounty hunters for the sake of this discussion, and they are also going to take bunker missions in the future when there's like so many
Yes.
bunkers because there's so many servers
That's
running
right.
all these hundreds of bunkers on these planets. And like that sounds absurd to anyone who doesn't know Star Citizen, but like that's quite literally the plan. Like that's the whole idea. And like looking at Pyro is an easy proof of that because like what's the number of objects in space that you can actually go to, like stations and stuff and places on planets? It's like 5 times more than Stanton. Like just actual full environments that are just like little sequestered spots like that. So like they're going to scale all this up, and that's what they're laying the groundwork for now. But anyway, so you're going to have all these bunkers, and NPCs are going to be doing the bunkers, and they're going to be generating missions of like the pirates of like, hey, these fucking fake pigs are coming to get us. Come help us. You were cool with Rudo. And like that'll be a mission that generates for you. And so like that's the thing they're shooting for. But when it comes to the actual like real practical, what it's going to mean is it's going to basically be like you're going to get to the bunker and maybe have to compete with an NPC that's getting it before you, and like that will have been kind of smartly generated out of the possibility of quantum, to make your mission more interesting. Um, or maybe you get there and like everybody's already dead, and it just like gives you that outcome, like, well, you know, you just get to loot all
Better
these
luck
guys
next
now.
time.
Yeah, better luck next time. Somebody was here,
Yeah.
like,
There's
um,
another cool factor to this, right? That Rinalin pointed out that is going to have an effect on it. There's a trait system, okay? And this trait system, it was touched on fairly briefly, right? In an SCL, the developer said there's 4 types of players, and they talked about aggressive, unaggressive, lawful, unlawful. Well, there's also a trait system for these Quanta NPCs where it's going to be: are they aggressive? Are they lawful? Are they skilled at what they're doing? Right? There's a
yeah,
skill factor there as well, and
are
it's
they
all going to be
brave?
a. Are they, yeah? Are they brave? Are they cowards? Right? There's a whole
Right.
set of sliders, and it's all randomly generated. So you may get really lucky in the fact that maybe you get like a young gun who's kind of cocky, thinks he's hot shit, but he's actually got a low skill level, and you'd be like,
And
"Oh,
he's reckless.
papa," and he's, yeah, he's reckless, and you come out on top, and you feel good about it. But you may also
Right.
just get fucked in the ass with some veteran gruff dude who's got a robotic arm, smokes a cigar, and he's got the cut flat top and an eye patch, and he just ruins your entire day, right? So there's a variety to it as well,
Yeah.
which is also going to help to breed that
Yeah.
depth of
And
And
gameplay.
that's another example of how they build these systems, because that same system of the NPCs have these behavioral traits that inform these actions they take. That same logic applies not only to quantum behaviors, but it applies to FPS, because they demonstrated that at CitizenCon just last year. It
Hmm.
applies to their flight regime. It applies to whether they're fight or flight, like not only their technique, like how aggressive they are, but like whether they'll just try to book it or something. Like all that stuff. Like a long time ago, they had some meeting and they were like, "We need NPCs to be able to like to generate personalities and have them behave in certain ways, and not have like 500 writers, like constantly doing this." And so like that's
right.
another, perhaps unsung victory of like their approach to this, is like that would only be possible if you had used that system, the same system for all those things.
Yeah. So I would like to point out that all of this stuff, I think my understanding is that it's all made possible by this idea of server meshing and the ability to segment the processing power of the universe into these different shards and to have
Exactly.
them be able to
That is
communicate with
that
one
is
another.
exactly right.
Right. So without server meshing, we don't have quanta. Without server meshing, we don't have large payer collapse. We don't have these systems. And
Exactly.
so building out this server meshing system and to have these early successful tests is so important for Star Citizen to become what Star Citizen is destined to be, which is, I mean, one of the great games of all time. I'm sorry,
Well,
it's
yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. No, no, don't
and
be
and
sorry. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
and like this, I'll totally like put on my cultist hood for a moment, just reveal to everybody, but like I really believe, based on what people who do these sorts of things for a living have told me when they've looked into how it's being done and stuff, they like I really believe that in like 10 years or something, that there will be books written about it, like that people who are studying networking will read at some point in their class. And like if even not in the technological sense, like the business sense of like they took a 15-year bet of like, we are limited by the technology of our time, but everything else is so stagnant right now, and there are people in this industry who are willing to push the envelope but are being denied these opportunities. That's another discussion entirely, but like having been around from the beginning, more or less, like 2013, having watched the discussions and read the news and heard about the people that have been brought on, listened to them talk about their experience, that's what I really feel like, is like CR was just like, I want to make the goddamn best space game, like best game ever, and the industry is ripe for it. The space game is not dead. Was one of like his tagline when he started, like the rumors of the death of the space sim have been greatly exaggerated. Like the interest is there, but moreover, the interest was there to revolutionize, to innovate, and like CIG bought out most of Crytek's talent, and that was like not only how they turned CryEngine into Star Engine because they literally got the people who made it, but they also empowered people like Tony, and got good managers, and also have had bad managers. Maybe CR's the worst one, but like Todd Pappy, like having gotten to interact with in close proximity with him, like they really do give off a good managerial vibe. Like the people that are on that team want to be doing that stuff, and CIG is like, it's not like they're like slave driving them to make this game. Like they want to push the envelope, and CIG is allowing them, and that's why all this passion comes together like this.
Cyber, can I break your heart?
Please.
Todd Pappy no longer works at CIG.
Oh no, he got laid off.
I think it was I think it was a combination of things, right? The current rumor, and I have yet to confirm this because it's difficult, right? Is that it sounded like they wanted him to move to the Manchester studio,
Yeah,
and that was not something he was willing to do.
yeah.
So yeah, he's no longer there.
Well, although unfortunate, I totally understand from a business perspective why they do those things.
Yeah.
Like just at my work, like just as an example, I work at a big company, and we had, as of last year, we had something like the average number of days that an entire department was in the building during a work week was one. Like people were just not coming in and not like doing things that like, it's not like they weren't working at home and being busy and stuff. It's just that like the lab was in disrepair, people like left, like everything was expired, like it was like people
Oh
didn't even
goodness.
work there, and it's just like there really is a detriment to your culture at work when people aren't present and accountable. And like even if that means that a fantastic leader has to go by the wayside in terms of a leader that's actually present, like I can empathize. I don't want to say support because I just don't know the details, and Todd's great, like
He's
fire
fantastic.
fire
You're
Marty,
gonna,
Marty
you're gonna
O'Donnell, why
hear
don't
Top
you?
Happy's name again in the future for sure. You're gonna
I,
hear his
oh
name.
yeah, definitely. Also, just an example of like the talent that CIG works with. Little thing that I found out on the Reddit today, but the guy who did the concept art for the Reclaimer worked on the art for Doom, and he actually like you can see some similarities with the floodlights on the Dune crawlers and the Reclaimer. Like it's the
That's
same guy.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
so like it's not like CIG's a sweat house and they're just like this is a big scam or whatever. It's like they actually get people who are like, no, I'd like to push the envelope and have the time and the team do it, and CIG is where I'm doing, and
Yeah, no,
like
they're
all the
pushing the
yeah,
envelope for sure.
yeah.
So, well, I mean, we just went on a huge journey talking about server meshing and more in terms of what it means for the players moving forward. Um, in the short term, right? I guess there's one thing that we didn't talk about, and that's the difference between dynamic and static server meshing. So just to kind of go over it a little quickly, right? Static server meshing is going to be what we get first. This is where they've got a set of predetermined servers controlling predetermined regions, right? So for now, as it seems, we're probably going to have a Stanton server and a Pyro server, and you will be able to traverse between the two, and that's just going to be how it works. And eventually, we may even get something like a Microtech server, a Hurston server, an ArcCorp server, a Crusader server, and you can travel through those. And then there's planetary servers in Pyro. We may get that, right? But that's still static because they are in place. Those servers govern that region, and that's that. Moving forward, part of what Rev described is that sometimes, having a large enough ship with got activity and entities around it, it may warrant its own server. The way this would work is with the system dynamic server meshing, which is where a server can detect its load and figure out when its load is getting to the peak of what it can reliably handle and be like, okay, I need a little bit of help here. And then there will be another server that can spool up and take some of that load. And that way you can have all these different servers working in tandem. And if suddenly that load decreases and that server doesn't need to be utilized anymore, it'll
Merge.
transfer load back. It'll put that load back over on the server, spool down the server, and then you're back down to a less number of servers.
Can I
So
just add a detail to that?
please.
So part of the reason this is possible is because of their approach to defining the world by object containers. And so like they're just basically like a giant file hierarchy that is like the moon yellow, and that's like a file, and everything inside of it is another file. And if you get down to Deacon's research, that's another file, and it's got all this stuff in it. And ships and stuff are the same exact way. And that's what will allow the handoff to be dynamic, because
Yeah,
all it's
because
going to do is just change the address of an object container to a different server.
and then everything underneath it goes with it. Yeah, that's right.
It's a
Exactly.
drag and drop of
And
the host file
and
over.
because and even to like further demonstrate this elegance, if I'm wrong, but like the reason that will be like quick and easy is because the changing of that one address is in the replication layer. And so like the replication layer is like, oh, this server needs to hear this information now. And so like it's not like
Just
all that like
shifts it.
terabytes of information has to actually go somewhere. It's just telling it to a different audience, you know. And so like it's truly amazing when you
Yeah,
understand.
if you know anything about how like data structures, trees work, it's kind of like just popping off this node and handing it to something else to deal with it, but maintaining that communication to where the node used to be.
So, static and dynamic server meshing.
Crickets.
We're going to get
Crickets.
static first. What that means in the short term, right? The biggest difference is just going to be performance gains, right? And with things like, Mike, you're going to get excited about this, the Vulkan API.
Well, I saw the DLSS is in FSR and CIG's own upscaling system.
You care
is on the release.
do you care to explain that a little bit, Mike?
Just
As much
I
as you
don't know
can?
the technical stuff behind it.
That's okay.
I'm not. I just know it gives you more FPS. It's gonna help people with lower tier cards. So let's say I don't know, maybe a 2060. It's a great card still. Will get more FPS compared to somebody in a
Right.
3080.
So
Not
what
more, but like more than they would.
Right, more
compared,
than they
like-
would. Yeah. So what I understand, right, kind of like we were talking about the level of detail that the LOD passes on ships, right? Is that this is a sort of artificial upscaling, is what I'm understanding, right? Where you can run things at a lower fidelity, I suppose is the word, right? But it artificially upscales it, and so it preserves that performance, and so it'll increase your frames on lower uh, lower
Yeah, like
performing machines.
it's not rendering all million polygons and it
Right.
doesn't 50
Exactly.
kilometers. Right.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's an artificial upscale. It's just to help boost performance. It's an optimization thing.
Yeah.
And
Well,
players
I
could
was gonna
help
say
other sorry, I was gonna say newer players.
you go ahead, Mike.
I would say we're probably gonna see a little bit more newer players because a lot of
Mhm.
new players see this and be like, oh, I need a 4080 or a 4090 to run this. No, you can reasonably well do this in a 2060, maybe low settings, maybe a 1080. But with the FSR and the DLSS,
I started playing this on a 2060.
I started playing on this on a 1060 on a MSI. On my laptop, but that was back.
And it's only getting it's only getting better. Yes, DLSS is still in the oven, but it was part of the monthly report. They're making really good progress on it.
It's on the release cards for the run map. So the DLSS, the
But yeah, I
ESR
was just saying the reason I brought it up is because the biggest change that we're going to see is a performance upgrade with server meshing.
Right.
A huge performance upgrade, and then DLSS is going to upgrade that even more. It's going to be overall a very smooth game. Things seem to be going well. So I think that's pretty much all we have tonight. Does anybody have anything else to add?
Sorry for talking so much. Thanks for.
Don't be sorry at all. That we're literally here to talk. So
yeah, literally.
But, okay, server meshing, and it's a juicy month. So I'm glad that Cyberpunk and Mike, you two could be here to chat with us. It was a lovely discussion. Lots of enthusiasm.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you
of
for
course.
having me. It was fun.
We'll have another podcast episode as soon as I can find a free day. Yeah, it's a juicy year. That's right. It is a juicy year. Maybe the next one we'll talk about some of these data mines or leaks. Maybe we'll see what happens. We've got a really awesome Inside Star Citizen coming tomorrow. Yes, I'm very excited for Inside Star Citizen, Star Citizen Live on Friday. So good stuff. Good stuff. Lots of juicy stuff. So, but anyway, thank you guys for watching. We've got Discord and our website and everything down at the bottom. So hop in, come hang out. We have a new development. We have got events every single night, every week. We're working on we've got Sunday through Friday right now, and we're working on a Saturday. So we are working on weekly events that take place every day of the week. So come and just come play with us. Got lots going on. So that's all I have to say. Thank you guys.
Yep. Thanks everybody. Thanks Riddlin for joining and chatting with us. Catch y'all next time.